Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I wanted to talk on an interview that French President Emmanuel Macron gave to some leading European newspapers, including Le Monde, El País, the Financial Times, etc. So without further ado, let's get into it. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, is no stranger to controversy, especially when it comes to stirring up political controversy regarding the United States as well as Russia. He's also been known to take jibes at China, so his comments in the interviews that he conducted with these leading European newspapers, whilst it does raise some eyebrows in certain quarters, I'm pretty sure that it was expected. He's one who is known for speaking his mind and saying things out aloud. He is known to, from time to time, upset the apple cart, for want of a better word. Now, I must add that, I think that if Emmanuel Macron was not a stooge to the political system and to the current system in place, the world order in place, I think he would have been somebody that the French could have probably been proud of, because his forthrightedness, if channeled in the right directions and for the people of his country and indeed Europe, could have been a source for some really good outcome. However, we all know that he is an establishment player. So with that being said, let's have a look at what he actually said during the interview. So I'm going to read out a few snippets from the interview that he conducted earlier. So this is an article from The Guardian in London, and it says, France's Macron urges Europe to assert its position amid dramatic changes in world order with US-China relations. The French President Emmanuel Macron has urged Europe to reassert its position in the world as the continent faces rapidly changing landscape in politics and trade. Now, we know that regarding this matter, the EU has signed the massive trade deal with India. We know that they are looking to the South American market as well with the Mercosur deal. The penny probably has dropped regarding the United States as being the dependent ally and guarantor of safety and security and peace within Europe. I think the Europeans have come to realize that ship has sailed, and now it's a matter for them to address themselves. The article goes on further. In an interview with a group of European media outlets, Macron warned that the strategy of bowing down to the US and other geopolitical powers doesn't work, and urged Europe to urgently step up its integration to get ready to face permanent instability ahead.
You heard the statement from the French president as he hosts the prime ministers of Denmark and Greenland. French President Emmanuel Macron said that the situation around Greenland was a strategic wake-up call for all of Europe. And we heard there from Greenland's Prime Minister as he thanked President Emmanuel Macron for the support and the close ties between France and the people of Greenland. France 24's International Affairs editor Philip Turl was listening to that statement here with me in the studio. Philip, what did you make of that? No surprises there from what all of the three of them said.
Well, it's a united approach to the European Union, to Denmark and to Greenland, that France, Greenland and Denmark and other members of the EU are going to stand together in the face of the threat put forward by the United States. They didn't name Donald Trump or the United States as being the main threat, but saying in practically all of the speeches there, one of them very short, the last one by Jens Frederik Nielsen, NATO has to play a stronger role in the Arctic. Security issues are being discussed over the threat by Russia and China. Europe. This is a strategic wake-up call for the whole of Europe. That was by Emmanuel Macron. It was echoed by Mette Frederiksen. She went even further, saying world order has changed. Maybe it's gone. It's up to us now and only us to fight together for the future. And then saying if we stand united and we don't compromise on our democratic values, we can find a way forward.
I think, as I've mentioned in my previous podcast, that what Macron is saying is very similar to what I've been saying in my previous podcast. There's a massive realignment, not only within the world, but within America's domestic and foreign policies. The policies of the Clinton, Obama, Biden administration are over. That ship has sailed. America is embracing a new path forward, one that it had always maintained in the past. It's realigning its cultural and political views, its military views, with the values of old. So it is now embracing the Monroe Doctrine, and America is pivoting back inwards. Manufacturing is set to be done within the United States, and Trump is now posing the United States as a global competitor in the manufacturing sector as well. This is something that the Europeans have been asleep to. They were complacent with the fall of the Soviet Union, and they thought that everything would be hunky-dory as they move forward. This huge wake-up and realignment has now left them scrambling. And Europe, being the continent that is always slow to react, is always the continent where nothing can be achieved simply because of indecision and so many differing viewpoints. They're actually an impotent, when you look at the EU, it's more of an impotent organization than anything else, because there are so many different viewpoints that it's rare to ever find them reach consensus on anything. So Macron has realized, and his warnings are bang on the money. He went on further to say, "It is time for Europe to wake up. If we do not decide for ourselves, we will be swept away." Macron said Europe was facing a profound geopolitical rupture with a profound shock on trade and defense as its relations with China and the US change. "I think the best way is to reduce risk, reduce dependencies, and make decisions for ourselves instead of waiting for the next crisis," he said. I remember when Bill Clinton did an interview for a little documentary on the Bosnia war, the Yugoslavia, the breakup. And I remember clearly, and it's something that stuck out in my mind, where he said that Europe, as usual, were indecisive, were slow to act, and that is why he decided to implement the airstrikes during the Bosnian campaign, because he found that the Europeans were woefully ineffective at reaching a decision. And you see this happening time and time again. The Europeans like to be told what to do, as opposed to doing what is right for them. I don't know why we have this apathy within us.
This is a strategic wake-up call for the whole of Europe. That was by Emmanuel Macron. It was echoed by Mette Frederiksen. She went even further, saying world order has changed. Maybe it's gone. It's up to us now and only us to fight together for the future. And then saying if we stand united and we don't compromise on our democratic values, we can find a way forward.
Macron said that Europeans stand firm but react too slowly and need to assert their position as a global superpower with more common leadership on the continent. He argued that the Franco-British-led Coalition of the Willing for Ukraine was an example of an initiative that allowed Europe to build a strong international alliance to defend its interests, also in defense and security. Again, he's bang on the money. I don't necessarily agree with the Franco-British initiative or the Coalition of the Willing. I think it's a joke. I think we have nothing to offer. However, I think that his assessment of the situation, when you look at the dynamics of it, he's 100% correct. There was no consensus within Europe. I've spoken about this in my previous podcast. In law, you have a term called meeting of the minds or consensus, especially in the law of contract. And if there is no meeting of the minds or no consensus, it will not go ahead. You will always have issues along the way. And this is the one factor that plagues Europe. There is never a consensus. There is never a meeting of the minds, because Europe is made up of different ethnicities, different religious and cultural backgrounds, people from different cultural backgrounds, people with different values. And on top of that, we're trying to impose this new value system which totally erodes everything. So I assume that the answer to Europe solving the problem of their inability to reach compromise and decisions is to introduce a completely new way of living. And that is by saying, let's erode all your old Christian values, your old family values. Let's introduce this. Everybody sit around the table, all hold hands, and we follow this path. That's not going to work. You need to look at what binds the European nations together and play to their strengths rather than play to their weaknesses by saying we're shifting everything to the side and we're starting with a new playbook. That's not going to work. That will never work, especially in Europe where the Christian faith is really deeply entrenched. Good luck if you think that this new playbook of moving people away from their religion, asking them to tolerate things that they believe are religiously amoral, is going to work in Europe. It is not going to work. As long as you have people like Hungary's Orban and Vladimir Putin, these Eastern European countries have a deep sense of religion, a deep sense of family, deep sense of family values. They do not want to move away from this. Rather than shoving things down their throat that make no sense, look at what binds them together and help use that to build Europe into the powerhouse it should be. Because currently, Europe is a joke. When you talk of European forces amassing, the Russians laugh at you. Forget about the Russians. The Americans laugh at you. Look at what Trump and all his administration had to say about the response the Europeans took by sending a few soldiers, a handful of soldiers to Greenland to muster some sort of, opposition to Trump's threat of invading Greenland. When your own allies look at you and laugh, and they know your weaknesses, where does it leave your adversaries? The article goes on further to say, but in comments likely to raise some eyebrows, Macron also once again suggested that Europe should reopen diplomatic channels with Moscow, so to not delegate this discussion to others, including the US. Here you see clearly Macron is pushing for dialogue with Putin. And the reason he's doing this is because Europe is now impotent. Donald Trump has conveniently sidelined Europe. He's criticized them for all their worth. They've been unable and ineffective at standing up to this American bullying that has been going on. Woefully ineffective. And what Macron is saying, guys, if you do not get your act together, these negotiations between Zelensky, Trump, and Putin will go ahead. A deal will be reached. Europe will be cut out, and everything that you committed to fight for in Ukraine will be gone down the drain. So Europe will be left high and dry. The Europeans being allowed to participate in the discussions between the Russians and the Ukrainians is purely a move of tokenism. This is Donald Trump in his rare moment of empathy allowing the Europeans a seat at the table. Because if Donald Trump, the narcissist, has to go in full board, the Europeans won't even be allowed to be on the continent when the meeting is being held. He'll make sure that they're sitting somewhere else, probably in Beijing, having discussions with Xi Jinping about the weather in Taiwan. So it's pure tokenism. Europe has now become irrelevant. It was irrelevant a long time ago. It just failed to accept it. This time, it's for real because the threat is coming from its own. The United States has now exposed Europe to the world and said, this is what you are. You're a joke. You have nothing and you are nothing. And this is what Macron is saying. Macron is saying, we need to be involved. And if we reach out to Putin, we can probably provide a better deal to Putin than one that the United States is doing. So what's happening here? Europe is now putting itself up against its benefactor, the United States. Moving forward, I can tell you the global order is being disrupted in a monumental scale. Trump, the disruptor, as I mentioned in my previous video, which I will put up over here, Trump, the disruptor, has achieved his objective. He has achieved his objective and he's moving full steam ahead. One of two things will happen. Europe will fall by the wayside and capitulate, or Europe will stand firm, rebuild, and become the powerhouse that it wants in one of two ways. Either maintaining its own sovereignty or falling back to the values of old and realigning with the United States, where it can then be seen as a peer competitor rather than a vassal. Because Macron does mention that Europe would be a vassal. In fact, I would wager Europe already is a vassal of the United States. And when I say Europe, I include the United Kingdom. You know, our little Keir Starmer prancing along trying to make himself relevant. The guy is a joke. He's made Britain a joke. He's made UK politics a joke. It's time this moron stepped aside, went into gardening, farming, went and ran a global corporation somewhere and continued, with all the firms that lobbied him, rather than involve himself in British politics, because he knows absolutely nothing. He is useless to the core. Macron further said, "We have European interests to defend, and I'm not going to delegate them to anyone, not even the US." Again, he's stressing European sovereignty, European hegemony. And I know Macron for a while has been trying to wrestle control of Europe away. However, Europe has continued to play vassal to the United States. And you see that in NATO. You see Mark Rutte, his posturing, his moves, everything about him. They realize that if NATO is not piggybacked by the United States, then NATO is nothing. And he's doing it not out of concern for Europe. He's doing it out of concern for his own job, his own relevance on the world stage, because his ego will become deflated. So he has to play second fiddle to the United States. This is the kind of instability and moronic attitudes that someone like Macron, or with the vision that he has, is going to continuously come up against in Europe. Because whilst you're going to have those that want to assert their sovereignty and their dominance, you're going to have those that are quite happy to be subservient, to be vassals, and to earn a living and become relevant in a tokenism manner. Macron also spoke about what he saw as a real risk of tensions with the US flaring up again over the European push to regulate social media platforms or Greenland. So again, Macron is saying Greenland is not off the table. It's just that the Iranian debacle has taken front and center stage, that it is being put on hold. The pot is still simmering. So Greenland will come back to the fore. And I would not rule out an American soft invasion of Greenland. I would not. Because Donald Trump's posturings, he's got a limited 4-year term within which to achieve what needs to be done. And again, I'm going to say it. Whatever he is doing now, he's doing to sweep the slate clean. He's clearing up all the rot and backlog that has been accumulated. He's now setting a stage for future presidents, Democrat or Republican, or any other party that might come up, to then follow. Because from what he is putting in place, the foundation is being built for where the United States will be 20, 50, 100 years from today. Anyone coming in wishing to reverse these policies is going to be foolhardy. I can tell you, yes, you have the little nicks and knacks, you have all the internal politics that go on, but look at the bigger picture. Step out. Look from outside. The bigger picture that is being created is that he is now building the United States and giving it back the credibility that it craves. And if he is successful, this is the model that future presidents are going to follow. It's almost like he's been put in there as a man with a mission, and he's single-handedly laser focused on achieving that mission, so that those coming after him can follow in that footprint. That is why he's trying to create the legacy with this Trump arch and this renaming airports and that, because he really genuinely believes that what he is doing is setting a stage for the future of the United States. So Macron has some hard work ahead of him. If he can rally the European nations under his banner, it would mean a wresting of control of the EU from the Germans.
Emmanuel Macron is walking into the EU leaders' retreat with a big pitch and a shrinking audience. The French president is pushing a made-in-Europe doctrine built on public spending, industrial protection, and by European rules, pitching it as Europe's path to independence. Berlin and Rome aren't listening. Germany's Friedrich Merz and Italy's Giorgia Meloni have formed a new power axis, openly rejecting Macron's protectionist instincts. Their message is blunt. Europe doesn't need walls. It needs competitiveness, open markets, and investor confidence. Macron's isolation is spreading fast. Nordic and Baltic states are lining up against Paris, warning that European preference risks driving capital out of the EU. In Brussels, diplomats quietly question Macron's leverage, calling him a lame duck with barely a year left in office.
I can see interesting times ahead in world politics, but primarily in European politics, because Europe is now in the fight for its survival. Make no mistake, if Europe does not succeed with this, then they will be reduced to a state of irrelevance, and they will be just a little blot on the pages of history. So I want to thank you for taking your time with us to spend with us today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Please remember to like, share and subscribe, as it helps us with the algorithm and it helps our channel to grow.